This podcast is sponsored by BPIExamPrep.com, the most affordable and effective way to make sure you ace any BPI certification exam. More at BPIExamPrep.com. Enjoy. Welcome to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford. Today we're talking with a panel of experts about trends in high-performance building and retrofits. We have a group. This is a first for the Building Performance Podcast. We've got, first of all, Scott Suddreth from Building Performance Engineering. Scott, thank you very much for being on the show.
Glad to be here, Corbett.
We have Anthony Cox from the New River Center for Energy Research and Training. Anthony, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
We have Brett Dillon from IBS Advisors. Brett, thank you.
Pleasure to be here, Corbett. I think I'm still sober.
I think so. You look that way. Allison Bales from Energy Vanguard. Allison, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so we have some of the top trainers in the country for home performance professionals. Now, let's just go ahead and dive in. Home performance professionals are trained in 5 or 6 day trainings. What is good about that and what is wrong with that?
The worst thing about that is you end up with a building scientist in a can. This is a guy who thinks he's a building science. He's opened up his brain, poured in a can of some basic knowledge, and out he goes into the unleashed in the universe. And he has no clue what he's doing. He's absolutely clueless. And a lot of times in those 5 day trainings, they can't get their hands on the equipment. The classes are too large because the price is low so that they get a lot of students in. And you just can't watch and say, yeah, that guy knows how to use that piece of equipment. They don't even have their hands on it. They just observe somebody else doing it, and off they go. And these certificate mills are just a real piece of crap. I mean, it's one of the worst pieces of shit we've seen come through the pipeline in terms of training professionals. And these guys are getting certified. And then they get unleashed out there on a quality assurance provider who has to spend an inordinate amount of time getting them actually trained up to what they should have been before they got released.
Now, I used to be one of those guys. I went through one of those 5 day trainings. I used to be a piano player before I did that. So I think that most of them know that they don't know anything and are desperate for help. What is the solution?
I really think the solution is we're going to have to create some kind of apprenticeship program. We're going to have to get experience required. We're going to have to get something that forces us to get way more practice before we get tested. And we need oversight. On the BPI side especially, as a HERS rater, you got to QA everything you do to use that HERS rater name. Theoretically, you got someone that can look over you, ask questions. BPI, you can get through the class if you can pass it. You got 3 years to wear that label and ruin the industry's name. And it's just so bad that so many folks we meet don't know how to set that blower up, don't know real combustion safety. And then we get in all these arguments with HVAC contractors. You shouldn't be in this industry. Why are you touching my flues? All of this stuff. And it's like, we need to figure out how to be part of, teams like this energy smart contractor approach, or the BPI energy performance contractor where, an HVAC guy is there, an auditor's there, or it's a bidder, whatever. But we got to quit being put against each other. I think this is a good thing at ResNet. We got ACA here. We're seeing a lot of HVAC guys want to be part of it, but I don't like this versus us versus them. We need to sort of figure out how to come to an agreement that we're all trying to do it together.
Mm-hmm. What will the market bear? I mean, we've got classes being offered for free because they're funded by a local government or the federal government in some cases. How can we solve the problem?
One of the big challenges with what will the market bear, that's one of Peter Drucker's 5 deadly sins of marketing, is basing everything on what the market will bear. You don't do what the market will bear. You do what's right. And what's right isn't giving away free training. Free training, the people in the training don't care. The people giving the training don't care. They're getting paid regardless of the performance of the students. The funders don't care because their goal is to get rid of the money so they can get more money. And at the end of the program, you end up with somebody who, frankly, just doesn't give a shit about their job that they're doing. And is there a job for them to do? So you go through this certificate program, you come out at the other end. Who's hiring these guys? Nobody I know. They say, oh, you went through that program? I'm sorry, we can't use you. You don't know what you're doing.
One thing I always tell our students is the home energy rated class is just a beginning. Our class is 8 days, not 5 days. And I tell them, even after 8 days, there is still a whole lot for you to learn. I've got a PhD in physics, and I've been in this industry for a decade now and built a house before that. And I'm still learning new stuff all the time. So it's just a beginning.
Now, Anthony, your center is one of the most decked out training centers in the world. And you do have some of that grant funding that we're talking about. How do you keep it from just coming in and letting your staff start resting on their laurels because now you've kind of made it?
Well, I think, first of all, we've been in it for a long time. We've got a lot of passion about it. We didn't, when the funding came along, there was a lot of maybe centers and things, that folks got into it. It didn't, hadn't had kind of the experience, they think, weatherization is kind of a hammer and a caulk gun type thing, but it's really a lot more to that. And like these guys were saying, you can't just go through a 5-day class and expect to know all that. You've got to take, it's a lot of information in a short time, and you've got to hear it more than once. I do pressure diagnostics and those kinds of things, and you teach it. You can, and you try to break it down, to explain it, but you can only explain so much in 5 days. You can't, that's one of my biggest things is kind of paring it down. How much, I can only give them this chunk, but ideally, like Scott and folks are saying, you need kind of a mentorship or a longer program. Sometimes we do like in our weatherization part, we do kind of it's like a 4 or 5 class kind of thing. I know that's not always affordable to folks to do, but like also the kind of blended learning stuff, where when you are in a classroom, that the time that you're there, that you can do lab things and stuff that you're not going over just basic PowerPoints and stuff. So we're starting to do more of that too. So the folks, when they come into the class, they're more on the same level, and then when you do have them at the training centers and things, you can do more hands-on and stuff, and and that's another thing that we do at our training center. We do lots of hands-on stuff. I'm even on my training on the road. We do trying to make this stuff visible. Where people can with our labs and little house of pressure props and things and stuff. But it's really just about having experience and a passion to really do a good job with it. Like I say, when you have funding and stuff, it's easy to kind of say, well, we'll buy all this stuff. But, me personally, where I've been in it a long time, we've always kind of dreamed of having, some funding to kind of really make a nice facility and do that. And we have, but I know, like I say, some places haven't maybe, done as good a job,
Sure.
And Corbett, I'll plug them. I got to work with them for about 1.5 years, and they got great people. It's the people you hire. I think it's got a lot to do with it. I heard it. I sat in on a lot of the ACA classes on purpose because I'm really focused on HVAC. And I sat in on Bobby Ring's class, who was talking about this sting they did about trying to find out if they had good workers and all. And, he really boiled down to salespeople in his trade need to be hired on attitude, not skill. And I think that's another thing in our industry that, I'm good at teaching skills, but I'm not good at making you a salesman or having a good attitude. And it's almost as if we call those soft skills. They're not soft skills. Those are like the hardest skills to teach. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to, it's not just the technical side. I think there's a bigger picture, especially when I try to push people into a business, because first I got to know how to run a business, not to mention building science.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, we've worked with a lot of contract trainers, also when we had the funds. So we actually worked with, private contractors and stuff and brought them in-house, to do the training from the grant funding and stuff too. So we had our own in-house folks, and then we work with folks like Scott, BPE, other folks at other training centers, independent trainers and things, and bringing those in. So actually developing their business and stuff too. So, and then we've got good relationships, and if we need to ramp up or ramp down, it's easier on the training center side. So making good use of those funds as well.
Now, we have a ring of what I consider to be incredibly high-quality people here in the circle. Brett, I know that we've already heard from you in a past show about your opinion of the disclosure on a list of trainers that we don't have the training review rates or testimonials from students for those. That we're all just kind of on an alphabetical list on ResNet and BPI's website. What I'd like to hear from the other guys in the group. What are we doing about this? What are they doing about it?
I don't know. I hear it being discussed on LinkedIn. I know a lot of folks are interested in trying to get a fair review out there. So, folks want to see how people have got feedback. And I'm sure there's a lot of reviews that are out. But like you said, there's nothing official. I know that BPI has recently implemented these new procedures where they finally kicked some people out, where they caught them doing things that were not ethical or whatever. But I'll admit that there's still, a lot of things going on that I would like the review to try to level the playing field. So I would like to hear Brett's opinion.
And this is really interesting because, I've been pushing this for 2 frickin' years. Pushing. We have to have a way for the consumer who's looking for training to be able to distinguish the guys who can deliver and the people who can't. In 2 years, this conference the Training Education Committee has as one of their priorities establishing that rating system that's going to be an algorithm that involves the pass rate on the test without the trainers knowing what that algorithm is, so they can't have the incentive to teach the test, and student reviews, where the student logs in to take the test. They'll be asked a 5-question survey, stars 1 to 5 or something like that, before they take the test about the quality of the training that they received. Then they take the test, get their scores. But those things will be aggregated, and they're looking at updating it once a year. I'd prefer to see it updated monthly because it's, right. It could be done instantaneously with today's technology. There's no reason for it to be updated once a year. But they are, for the first time, that's going to be the quality assurance process on trainers. And it's going to be a combination. So your aggregate score that gets published on the ResNet website is going to be based on your ability to train the students so that they know what they're doing, is sampled knowledge on the test, as well as the student reviews that are aggregated.
Excellent.
For the first time, that's going to happen.
I think that'll really help. Now, teaching to the test, in some ways, I think that the standards people design the guidelines and the tests to be an accurate measure of whether somebody knows what they're doing or not. First of all, is it a good measure, do we think?
I can tell you the test is a good metric of how well you can take tests.
Yeah. The test itself, but then the hands-on part of that is, being like Brett was talking about too. Being able to really say that somebody can do something, they can pass, maybe they're good test takers. But then on the other hand, we have people that aren't good test takers that are good field folks, and they'll do great in the field, but poorly on the test. So you kind of have the vice versa of that. But definitely having the hands-on test and things and stuff, and being able to individually see folks do that, and ultimately maybe through their ratings and some things afterwards, a few weeks or even a month or so down the road, kind of follow up with them, not just the week or two that they're there too.
And I would agree that we got to have blended learning styles and blended testing styles, because I was never a good test taker in school. I had a 4.0 in school, but I did horrible in GREs and SATs, to where I just wasn't that kind of thinker. And, I meet so many people that hands-on, I met a guy at Anthony's place who said, I'm a dragon in the field, but I can't do that. I can't do the digital test. And he was right. Hands-on, he was as good as anyone I'd met, but sometimes he couldn't take the computer test, where it was a limitation. And I really wish there was, for example, when we're doing BPI testing, we'll do things like, can the candidate identify a problem with the envelope? I would much rather them sort of just let me watch them audit the building and really go through the entire attic, the crawl, show me all the problems, instead of finding one example of it. I know it's time limited and it's hard to get houses in the country, but working from props and other things is sort of a limiting factor. I think it nails a lot of the knowledge, but it's sort of like there's so many other people the people that work in this industry have such a varied background that it's just, I don't think it's a fair metric. So I'd like to be open to other ways to measure that.
Let me say something about that too. Over the years since we've had the online test, I think since 2005 or whenever it was, the test has gotten a lot better. The questions have been cleaned up, but I still have one big gripe, and that is that the test does not update very often, and the HERS standards change 2 or 3 times a year. Some of the questions on the test relate to the HERS standards. They change. All of a sudden, the question on the test is obsolete because it's got 2 right answers. And I had a student miss passing by 1 question, and it was because of a bad question, because the HERS standards had just changed. So we need to change that process, so when the HERS standards change, we have these questions tagged, we can get them fixed right away.
Mm-hmm. Now, an online test is one thing, but a field exam is something else, and I feel like a field exam is a very elevated situation for most people. They're very stressed out, they may be sweating, there's some dude looking at them, just watching everything that they do
with a camera.
With a camera now, and that's something else. And I'm sure ResNet, because ResNet now is also an ANSI standards organization, will have to start incorporating, when you've got the combustion testing or any kind of field component, which I'm sure will come up at some point. You're shaking your head.
No, we're not taking the training standards ANSI. Only our HERS rating methodology in the testing in the performance testing, diagnostic testing, or those standards are going to be taken ANSI, but the training protocols are not going to go ANSI.
Well,
we decided we weren't going to go through all that bullshit.
Regardless, there will be at some point, I believe, a field exam for ResNet, right, where you can set up a blower door, set up a duct blaster, actually run them.
Now. They're supposed to be doing that now. I mean, it's in the training standard now that they have to demonstrate proficiency with the equipment.
Mm-hmm. and whether it's an exam situation or in the training, I just want to refer my experience when I took BPI exams. They were actually a learning experience. I learned more during my exam, actually, than sometimes during my training. And nowadays, with the cameras and the ANSI and all this stuff, and we're trying to be very rigid, the proctors for these exams do not have the liberty to kind of help and coach and ask pointed questions and kind of lead somebody to an answer that then will stick with them forever. Is that a mistake?
Well, I don't want to help someone pass a test they shouldn't be able to pass. I want to find out what they know. But I really disagree with not being able to give them feedback of what they did wrong. I think that our whole industry is built on learning and making mistakes. And if you have to wait 2 or 3 weeks, get an email, and you're looking at 10 columns that tell you pass or fail, you don't know what to do better when you want to retake the test. You call the proctor and say, hey, I failed that. What should I do better? And we're not allowed to tell them what they did wrong on the test. I just disagree with that. I think we need some way, like you said, to give them feedback. And, for that matter, they need to learn time management. If they're going to expect it in 2 hours to do a field guide, they need to be taught how to use a field guide. And yes, we do it, but it's once again in 5 days. There should be clear videos on YouTube and BPI saying, here's a field guide, here's some strategies how to take it. The proctor can't, we explain all that, but it's one thing to teach them the technical side, but then for them to do it in 2 hours with good time management under the stress of the camera, you're asking a lot of someone who's got great skills. So there's a lot of protection to make the test safe. And I don't have total disagreement with cameras, because there's times where if you challenge that I gave you a bad test, pull the video. We'll see if you passed or failed. We'll let everyone see. So there's plus and cons, but I think we've got too much stress on trying to make it fair, and it's not a fair metric for the actual student. So for what it's worth, I'd just like to be on the public record.
What is the future of home performance training?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be more of the blended training, and we're going that direction ourselves, because the 8-day class, it has to be a longer period. And we're going to start, instead of just having one option where you come to our class for 8 days, we're going to mix it up and you can do the basic material online and these modules that we're putting together, and then come for the live training for 5 days. So I think that's going to be the trend. Energy Logic has done that. Performance Systems Development has done that. And with computers now, it makes perfect sense. And also, there's a lot of resources online, videos and blogs and all kinds of stuff that people can read. And buildingscience.com is an amazing resource. I cannot believe they put all that stuff out there for free.
And the Department of Energy just released a solutions center that's online that our listeners should be aware of.
So what I look at is, from my perspective, the best way to train somebody to do a job is start teaching them those base components of how to do the job, different tasks, break those down, and then get them out there in the field doing the job and sort of replicate on-the-job training during the course. If you want to talk about the stress of time management and all the rest of that, take them through 3 or 4 or 5 different scenarios where you're leading them through them and you're teaching them, on this house we're going to look at these things, on this house we're going to look at these things, in this house, and they get this broader range of experience with different housing types, different scenarios. This house is a frame, this house is a finish, this one has a furnace, this one has a heat pump, this one's got an electric furnace, which is just a toaster oven with an air conditioner.
Illegal in Georgia now.
Oh, fantastic. Not illegal in Texas, unfortunately. And more hands-on in the field, replicating that job under field conditions, not in a lab, not working with props, not working off of computer screens, not sitting there on their ass watching some boring guy talk about his PowerPoint slides. We have to get it into the replication of the actual job and work them through that process, so when it comes time for them to go out in the field on their own, they know what they're doing, and we have confidence that they know what they're doing. So when it comes time for them to do the practical exam in the field, we can go, here you go, have at it. And they've worked out all those stressors. They know, they have confidence in their ability to do the job because they've been exposed to it, they've done it. And you just start them off saying, you know you can do this because you've already done it.
Yeah. I think the blended learning thing, is good as well. Like we've mentioned already, I think that's definitely going that way. We also doing the mentor stuff, like Rhett was saying, in the field stuff. And even I take, I've done sessions and trainings and stuff where we would just take some of our classroom props, even out to a house, just kind of set that up in the garage, do some demos, and then we'd actually go in the house, and do the work on the house, and that's worked really well too. So kind of both of those items, the blended learning and the actual real houses. We do the labs, but when you get folks out into the real houses, then they get their hands on and things and stuff. But the labs are nice because you can control things and stuff, and do different scenarios. And then when you go out to a house, like I say, it is different, and you kind of stuck with what you got at that house. But then you take that and you mold your training with the house that you got, and you go through the scenarios for that particular house. But definitely the blended learning, and then maybe more mentoring, more hands-on, so you really know that they've gotten this. And smaller group size. You can't take 20 people out to a house. If you're one trainer, maybe 8 people at the most. And if you got 2 trainers, then you can kind of split it up and have people outside, people inside. But you can't just take a lot of people and then maybe one person doing hands-on and 8 people watching. It doesn't. They don't get a lot out of it, and you don't feel confident that they've learned a lot either. So
I'll finish this up. I know Brett's got to get out here to get to a session. I'll just say that we've had luck a couple times before we do any class training, we just go straight to the field first thing, and get them excited about it. Once they see what we do and see all the toys and all that, when they come back to that class set down, they're much more serious because they're excited now. So the idea of giving them hands-on in the very beginning, before we bore them and turn them off, I think has been very successful. So I'm excited that I think we got a good future here, but we just got to play it smart.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you guys all for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford. Tune in next time.